Most people think manipulation is easy to spot. Gaslighting, guilt-tripping, love bombing, silent treatment, those are obvious, beginner-level tactics. The real manipulators don't work that way. They don't try to control you through force. They control perception. They reshape how you interpret situations, people, even yourself, quietly. And the dangerous part is, highly socially intelligent manipulators rarely look manipulative. They look emotionally aware, charming, helpful, trustworthy, until you realize your thoughts no longer feel entirely yours. Tonight, we're not discussing surface-level manipulation. We're discussing the deeper psychological tactics used by people who understand human behavior extremely well. And once you notice these patterns, you start seeing them everywhere. The first tactic is forced teaming. As Robert Cialdini said, the fastest way to gain trust is to create the illusion of shared identity. Forced teaming is when someone artificially creates a sense of us very early. Phrases like, "we think the same," "people like us understand each other," or "we are on the same side." It sounds harmless, but psychologically, it bypasses caution. The manipulator wants emotional alignment before trust has actually been earned. Humans naturally lower defenses around perceived allies. Once someone feels like part of your team, your brain stops evaluating them objectively. And that's exactly the opening manipulators want. But some manipulators go further than creating connection. They reshape the frame before you even respond. The second tactic is negative assumptions framing. Irving Goffman once said, "Whoever controls the frame controls the interaction." This tactic works by embedding accusations inside assumptions. "Why are you being defensive? You always get insecure about this. I didn't realize you were this selfish." Notice something. The accusation is hidden inside the framing itself. The target instinctively begins defending the assumption instead of questioning whether the assumption was valid in the first place. The manipulator quietly controls the emotional direction of the conversation. Over time, this creates confusion and self-doubt. You stop evaluating reality independently. You start reacting inside their narrative. And once someone learns your emotional weak points, the manipulation becomes much more personal. The third tactic is trauma hooking. Carl Jung said, "What wounds us can also become the point through which we are controlled." Trauma hooking happens when someone studies your emotional pain and subtly attaches themselves to it. They become the comfort, the rescuer, the only person who understands. The manipulator mirrors empathy extremely well early on, but the real goal is dependency. Once emotional attachment forms around unresolved pain, leaving them starts feeling emotionally dangerous. The victim confuses emotional relief with trust, and eventually, vulnerability becomes leverage. But some manipulators don't stop at emotions. They begin shaping identity itself. The fourth tactic is identity hijacking. Michel Foucault once said, "If you want to control people, tell them who they are." This tactic slowly rewrites how you see yourself. You are not the kind of person who does that. You've changed. That's not who you are. At first, it feels observational. Eventually, it becomes psychological conditioning. Humans naturally try to stay consistent with perceived identity. Manipulators exploit this. They assign identities strategically, then reward or punish behavior around those labels. The victim slowly starts performing a version of themselves designed by someone else. And once identity becomes unstable, approval becomes addictive. The fifth tactic is intermittent validation. B.F. Skinner said, "Uncertainty intensifies emotional dependency." This is one of the strongest conditioning tools in psychology. The manipulator alternates warmth and coldness, praise and distance, affection and withdrawal. Consistent rewards become predictable. Intermittent rewards become obsessive. The brain starts chasing the next moment of approval. The victim becomes emotionally hooked, not because they feel secure, but because they don't. And eventually, the manipulation expands into obligation itself. The sixth tactic is social debt conditioning. Robert Cialdini said, "People feel compelled to repay what they receive." The manipulator constantly gives favors, support, attention, generosity, but none of it is truly free. Over time, emotional debt accumulates psychologically. The target starts feeling guilty for saying no. Boundaries begin feeling selfish. The manipulator creates silent control through obligation, not force. But the darkest manipulators don't just influence behavior, they isolate perception itself. The seventh tactic is narrative isolation. George Orwell said, "Control the narrative and you control reality." Narrative isolation happens when someone slowly becomes your primary interpreter of reality. They subtly discredit friends, family, outside perspectives, criticism. The target gradually loses alternative viewpoints, and without outside reference points, the manipulator's version of reality becomes dominant. This is where manipulation becomes most dangerous, because the victim no longer realizes they're being manipulated. The most dangerous manipulators are not the loudest people in the room. They rarely appear aggressive. Most of the time, they appear intelligent, emotionally aware, even trustworthy. Because real manipulation is not about controlling your actions directly. It's about reshaping how you think until your decisions begin serving someone else's design without you noticing. And once someone can influence your perception, they no longer need force. Awareness is what breaks that cycle, because manipulation survives best when it remains invisible.